yes, I have been involved for quite a while in themes relating different topics, very different topics. One of the topics is open education or open educational resources, and the other topic is artificial intelligence, and specifically artificial intelligence for education. And the goal that I'm working on, and that I've been working on with the help of UNESCO in the context of the UNESCO chair, has been to join these two things. It just happens that over the last few months, both of these topics, open education on one hand and artificial intelligence on the other, have both been sort of growing and becoming important forces in the field of education. Obviously, AI, everybody knows why it is being important. We're seeing it everywhere. Open education may be less trivial, but I can assure you that it is pushed very, very hard by international actors, for example, by the UNESCO, as being perhaps one of the best ways to ensure a better education for all in the future. So I'm going to try in this talk to talk about both things, open education, artificial intelligence, but also to try and reunite them and see how they influence each other. As we said, there will be time for a discussion afterwards. So I suggest I just give my talk and then we have the questions, unless for some reason something I'm saying is completely confusing and somebody wants to ask a question, and I would interrupt and would clearly be happy at that moment to make some point more clear. So this is the outline of the talk. So what I've just been doing, talking about the topic in general, I'll continue a bit. I will present the UNESCO chair, Higuera. I think it's an important object, and the UNESCO does provide us with important objects today in a world of crisis, and people from Ukraine will understand that more than any other, right? It is important that there are places where the international community is able to keep speaking to each other. So UNESCO is one of those places. And it's a very strange sentiment to, in a way, be in a place where you are allowed to sort of think of the world afterwards, the world in which we will all have to work together. So then I'll talk about the two main topics, open education, AI for education, and then why these two, why this should be sort of different. What's the reason for these things to be different? So why do we want open education for artificial intelligence? And then on the other hand, why do we want artificial intelligence for open education? So my introduction is just really saying in a short version what I'm going to talk about, so that if some people think, okay, I've had 5 minutes, I can now leave and do something else, at least they've heard my pitch. So my pitch is AI is a global phenomenon. With GPT-4, we've just seen how powerful AI is becoming in the context of education. For those who have followed the introduction of GPT-4 in the market, when they released GPT-4, most of the reasons for saying that GPT-4 was better than GPT-3, most of these reasons were actually based on education. They were showing us how GPT-3 would perhaps fail some exams, but GPT-4 would be able to obtain good results, or that GPT-4 would obtain results in the best 10% of those passing the exams, whereas GPT-3 was much worse. There's two remarks there. One of the remarks is, yes, we were in an era with GPT-3 where we were understanding that AI could basically match the boring students, the students who were able to get some ideas, put them together, not really give us some interesting insights, just put some of the ideas they will have learned and put them and throw them on an exam paper. With GPT-4, we changed completely, and through the exams or through the education, we have seen that basically we're talking about an AI which is now capable of eliminating us, of surprising us, and not just of throwing some ideas together. So on the other hand, that's for the AI, for the open education. In 2019, the UNESCO unanimously adopted what is called a recommendation. So all the countries, members of the UNESCO, signed this recommendation, and the recommendation was in favor of something called open educational resources, which I will be describing in a minute. But it was the recommendation of the year 2019 for UNESCO. So UNESCO's got a lot of topics, but the fact that it concentrated its attention in 2019 on that just shows how important it was. in 2021, at the next General Assembly of the UNESCO, it was artificial intelligence, which was the object of a recommendation. So these two objects seem completely different. One is promoted by the big industry, the other one is promoted by the UNESCO. The goals are different, but can they somehow work together? Is there any reason to work together? So what I'm going to try and show in this talk is that the answer can be positive. So first, let's just say a few words about what the UNESCO chair is. It's a very small group. You've got a picture of the group there. So the UNESCO has what's called UNESCO chairs in a program called UNITWIN. So I'm going to take it for granted that people know what the UNESCO is. It's, let's say, the little sister of United Nations. It was invented, or it was created at the same time as the United Nations, just after the Second World War. And today there are about 700 chairs and there's 100 networks. So these are tools that UNESCO's put around the world, disseminated, trying to be equilibrated so that there are a lot of chairs also in the global south, in order that both the research agenda on themes that are important or seen as important for the community in general can be somehow highlighted. And between these themes, education is, of course, an important question for UNESCO, but surprisingly, artificial intelligence is also. Not because all sciences are important, but because that particular science has been seen by UNESCO as being very relevant, in the sense that if we don't sort of approach the science in the right way, we might end up with some very big inequalities in between the global north, the global south, or inside the societies. So you get a chair, the chair lasts 4 years, and you don't get a grant, but you do manage to get hold of some money to do these things, because once you've got a UNESCO chair, there are people who are willing to support you. Not meaning that we're always happy to have some money. So in Nantes, we've had a first chair, and it's been renewed in 2021, and we're also submitting a UNITWIN network, which is about open education more than artificial intelligence. So the network, well, works with all sorts of partners, with Europe, but works also with the French education authorities, works with the university, well, handles European projects, research projects that can be either in education or in artificial intelligence, or both. Okay, so let's go back to the topics. So the first topic is open education. So open education is a theme. If you search for it on Wikipedia, you're going to find all sorts of definitions. One of these is by my good friend Telamiel from Brazil, and saying, okay, there's three aspects to it. One of them is what's called open educational practices. So the way you teach, the way you educate has to be open. I'll say a little bit more about that, but you can think of a lot of ways. You can also think that our current system of education is not very open. So a system in which you involve the student much more, perhaps you define the objectives much more with the student, perhaps the evaluation, the accreditation can be open so that everybody can see what is happening, what are we trying to find out, what are we trying to measure. I mean, there's a lot of ways of doing open educational practices. The second fundament for open education is open educational resources. This idea is that knowledge is common goods. So as a common goods, you want the knowledge from education to be shared as widely as possible. Sharing is not just a generous idea. Sharing is also technical. It means you have to do it the right way. It's not just about saying, hey, let's share. It's about saying, yes, let's share, and I'm going to prove that I'm sharing so you don't have any problems later, which means that I'm actually putting licenses, like the licenses you see in this slide, to reassure the next person that when the next person is using this, they have had in anticipation my consent to do it. So open educational resources are educational resources which are open, which really means that they are clearly shared in such a way that the next person can do a number of things with them. And then often, but not always, we will suppose that the sharing will be done on platforms and on tools which are free, open, and so that means that encourages what's called a FLOSS, free, libre, open source software. So the middle bit, which was called the Open Educational Resources, is defined, or is commonly defined by something that is the 5 R's. So the 5 R's are the 5 rights we're trying to maintain when we get into sharing OER. So the first R is the right to retain. It means that suppose that you've created a resource that I'm interested in, I'm allowed to have a copy on my computer. This may seem trivial, but it is not so trivial. If you buy a video that you have spent perhaps a lot of money on, and this video you decide to make a copy of, you're more probably than not actually doing something that is illegal. So the second one is that you're allowed to reuse. So it means not only am I allowed to sort of have this video or your set of slides or your textbook or something like that, but I can actually use it. I can use it in a classroom. And this is vital when you see what has happened with the pandemic. During the pandemic, we were using tools like this one, which was Zoom. And so teachers were suddenly finding themselves in a very difficult situation where they were giving lectures, perhaps using material on which they didn't really have the rights to use it. You know, you take some slides here, some photographs there, a little video here, and you assemble all this and you call it your course. But actually, it's not really your course, and you probably haven't asked everybody for the permission to use their bits. So having this right to reuse is putting you in much less danger, because it means, yes, I am allowed to teach using this material. And furthermore, if somebody is actually then getting a copy of this video, or this video is then on YouTube, they won't be suing me or my university saying, no, you're not allowed to have this. I would like some money now. The third right is fundamental and is fundamentally different from what you might find in the field of, say, open access. It's the right to revise. So suppose I do a set of slides, this set of slides, and Volodymyr wants later on to use this set of slides. One thing is that he uses them as they are. But the other thing is that he's allowed to pick and choose. He chooses some slides, he makes changes, he will want to put some context, because I'm probably not speaking about Ukraine in these slides. So is he allowed to do this? In most cases, you're not. Like in research papers, you're not allowed to pick somebody's research paper and change things in that person's research paper. So here, in the case of education, it's absolutely necessary. No teacher likes being given just a script and reading a script. A teacher likes changing that script, identifying oneself inside that script. So the right of revision has to be given. The right to remix is just a little bit further from revision. It's the fact I can take 2 open educational resources and put them together and then share the result or do something with the result. And the 5th right is the right which enables me to keep the cycle going, because once I have created, not from scratch, but through revision and through remix, a new resource, I can put it back in the system. What is not written here is that there is one right that should always be granted unless the author waives that right. It is the author or the right of citation. And if you notice the little logo on the left, it's called CC BY, and the BY means that, yes, if Volodymyr uses these slides and makes changes, he's allowed to do everything he wants. The only thing is he should just at some point say, right, and by the way, no, the initial version was by Colin Higuera. So this is sort of the ecosystem that we're trying to promote. And as I've seen that SEVIC is really very much about sustainable education, you can see why it makes sense in the contents of sustainable education. We are now thinking of courses as sustainable objects, not objects that are just there to stay as they are, but they are there to be recycled and to be transformed and to keep on living. So open educational resources is exactly the tool that allows educational resources to be sustainable. Okay, so I won't say much about OEPs. It's fun to go and search on the web. So OEPs was Open Educational Practices, and to try and find an exhaustive list of what OEPs can be. There's an enormous amount of things. What matters here is that it's all these things that when we see a teacher doing it, we're thinking, wow, that's a modern teacher. That's a real interesting way of teaching. So really, roughly speaking, every time you start thinking out of the box in terms of teaching, and you're trying to put, for example, the students in a driving position so that they themselves are deciding how to study or where to go or how to add material to the course, you are in an open educational practices agenda. So this is just what I said. I'm about to finish a paper, but it is in French only, on this question of saying, yeah, if we look at OERs as a sustainable education, we want to choose the license that matches best the idea of sustainable. So the idea of sustainable is the idea that once you create something, what you create has to continue its life afterwards. It doesn't just stop there. It's not just about redistribution in an identical form, because we know teachers need to readapt, to readjust, need to make decisions, to take into account the local context, to take into account the age of the students, all sorts of things. So this is why the conclusion we have reached with Marianne Dubé when working on this question is that between all these Creative Commons licenses, and I'm not going to be talking about the licenses, but I'm hoping people I'll start knowing what they are, and if not, I encourage them to look into Creative Commons licenses, is one of them fits best the bill, and that is what is the CC BY, the Creative Commons BY license, as being the one that allows to make it the easiest for the next person in the chain to reuse and readapt and remix and etc. the material we're sharing. Okay, so that was about open education. Now let's have a look at AI in education. So AI in education is a number of questions that we're identifying little by little through conferences. So some of the questions concern AI used in education, as in there is AI out there, there is AI tools, there's AI behind Zoom, there's AI behind the tools, the search engines, and clearly there's AI in something called GPT-4. There's AI in translation tools, etc., etc. So all these tools out there that contain AI, including all the tools that are developed specifically for education by the community, by the ed techs, all these tools, we need to study them to understand, do they work? What do they do for the students? What do they do for the teachers? What do they do for the schooling system? And to then encourage the creation of new tools when they work, or to advocate against certain tools when we believe that it's just a big hype and they are really leading nowhere. The second question is AI taught in education, which is a sort of a new question. It's only arrived, it was already a little bit on the table, but let's face it, the hurricane created by ChatGPT has made this question urgent. It's the question of saying, well, shouldn't we actually be teaching something about these things to the pupils? But then if you're thinking about that, you're thinking, okay, but who's going to do this teaching? And then you're thinking, okay, well, who are the teachers? How are they going to be trained to actually do this teaching? So those are the sort of questions that we are also thinking about in the same question of AI in education. So as you can see, there's two different questions here. So the first question I'm not going to go on about, because you have had a great lecturer come to tell you all about this, which is Wayne Holmes. I think he was here on the 23rd of March, well, here meaning in SEVIC on the 23rd of March, and I'm pretty sure you can find the video on YouTube. Volodymyr can share the link if he's got it. But what Wayne and Tuomi have been doing is having a systematic analysis of hundreds of these tools that are out there, and trying for each one to explain how they work, why they don't work, what dangers they may have, dangers for ethics, for economy, for the teachers themselves who are going to feel uncomfortable. There's a number of things out there. So their paper will say that there are some AI tools that are focused on the institutions. So how can we help the institution, i.e. the education system, to work? There's some tools that are focused on the teachers. So how do we help the teachers manage the classroom, regulate? And there's some tools that are focused on the students. So tools that will help the student to learn better, to do their homework better, to find things out, to get into intelligent tutoring systems, and so onwards. I'm not going to talk about this because I'm taking it for granted that, if you're really interested, you should not be listening to me talking about this. You should listen to Wayne. I mean, he's much more of a specialist, and he's given a talk. So I do work with Wayne a lot. So we have quite a number of battles. Wayne is a person who comes from the social sciences. I didn't say so, but I'm actually an artificial intelligence person. I've been working in AI most of my life. So we have discussions about, how much of all this, and when we're trying to educate teachers, when we're trying to talk about something called AI literacy, which is what should people know about this? So, is it technological or is it human? Should we really think only about explaining the technology, how does AI work? Or should we explain much more in a more, a stronger way, what is the human dimension? What does AI do to society? What does it do to the learner? What does it do to the teacher? And we're hoping to build a system in which we get a bit of both. This is a very difficult question, right? It's not just on paper, it's very nice. We can see why it would be good to have teachers who both understand technology and social sciences. But if you look back, depending on, what system you have known, this very rarely happens. You've got teachers who are either in technology or in science, or either they're in social sciences, and there's not enough speaking between the two. Okay, these topics, are being addressed today in an urgent way. In an urgent way doesn't mean that people are hurrying to get a result. It means there's a lot of efforts done there. So there are actors like the Council of Europe, there's actors like the European Union, and there's actors like the Unesco, who are all coming out with reports on how to educate, how to take into account AI in education. And in all cases, the word ethics appears very, very quickly. Okay, so now the links between AI and for education and education for AI. So AI for open education. I'll just give a couple of examples that I have been working on. So I've been working with colleagues on projects where the question is the following. So open educational resources are resources that have been built by individuals, sometimes by individuals, by institutions. They're hard to find. They can be on platforms, they can be in digital libraries, but when you use a search engine, you're actually going to find it very difficult to find. So the question is, can we do something about that? Can we build sort of search engines? Can we build recommendation engines in order to find OER? But we don't want to have only the OER built in the top American universities in English. We need this to be multilingual. We need this to be multicultural. We need this to not depend on one particular system, one particular platform, and so onwards. So the project was called X5 Gone, meaning X5 times 5. So all these 5 dimensions have to be taken into account. I'll just use this little tool, this little picture, to explain why AI matters so much when you're actually trying to deal with these problems. So first thing is you get to get hold of the material itself. Where are they? Where are these resources? So this is called crawling and ingesting, the beginning of the chain. So it's hard work. There's more human than anything else, even if nowadays you can do it with, again, ChatGPT. So you can find AI in that first step. So once you've got it, suppose you find this video or any other video, you need to do some transcribing and some translating. From the video, you have to extract the text, and the text you perhaps want to have it in various languages. So you need translation and the transcription. And both of these tools or both of these involve huge amounts of AI. Then once you've got text, you want to know what the text is about. So this is called semantic analysis, which is analyzing through automatic programs, again, based on AI, find out, what the keywords are, what are the topics of a talk, can we have an automatic abstract, things like that. Once you've done those things, which are the things that we know how to do, can we do more complex things? Can we learn more things about these? Can we find out who a particular video is intended for? What sort of people will understand it? How much you need to know? In what order should we look at two videos or two courses? I mean, there's a lot of questions that if you want to have an ecosystem of all these OERs, you need to handle. And then you need to store all this, index it, and again, you're going to find AI. So as you can see, if we want to be able to have a world in which we've got open educational resources, we need the AI to actually help us manage, organize, digest this, because we can't just have humans. It won't work. There's just too much stuff out there, and there's going to be more and more of it, of course. Okay, so we work on these things in France. We're working on that, and we're trying to work on it in particular in the French language, because we did find out when we did this project as I've gone, there was a lot of resources in English, but there were not that many in French, or better said, they were even more difficult to find. So this is what we're working on this moment, and we're hoping to launch something we called un relaton. Sorry, I've left this one in French. Un relaton is an OER-athon, sort of parties in which people like us will sort of meet perhaps on the web and annotate open educational resources so that other teacher can use them later. We need a mixture between collective intelligence and artificial intelligence. Okay, another topic we've been interested in, and again to show how we need AI in order to deal with open education. Last year in May, we were organizing in Nantes the Open Education Global Conference. So this is the big conference on open education. And we had people from the different countries of the world. And so we decided that it was unfair that everybody had to speak English. And so we dealt with it by trying to have a system using AI to ensure automatic translation of what was being said during the conference. So the speaker could speak in either of these four languages, English, French, Spanish, or Arabic. And from there, with on your mobile phone or on your computer or on the screens that were in the room, you could have access to either the cloud of words, explaining to us what the talk was about, or even the actual transcriptions. So you could read as the person was speaking, you could read what he was saying, but in your own language. Technically, we're still far away from having managed this. This was just a proof of concept, but it was very important. We understood through this conference that colleagues, typically from South America or from the Arabic countries, they were really very emotional about it, because going to an international conference and being able to speak their own language was something that was very important for them. So this is, again, a place where we would like to do openness, but if we don't have the AI tools, we're going to be blocked, because language is a barrier. So if openness is also about breaking down barriers, that's one of the barriers we want to do something about. Okay, now if you look at it the other way around, I'm keeping an eye on the time. The other way around is, what do we do about AI in education? Should we educate to AI? So let me tell you a bit about a project that we are running in Europe in this moment. So it is a project which is called Artificial Intelligence for Teachers. Actually, it's called Artificial Intelligence for and by Teachers. And it was launched 2 years ago by and supported by an Erasmus Plus grant. So this is a grant that is given by the European Union. And the idea was to train the teachers in order to have tomorrow some teachers who in the schools were able to get hold of AI tools and do something with it, but also have sort of a point of view on what they were doing to avoid just using them without understanding what was happening, which could actually, in the case of AI, be a very bad idea. So the starting point is that teachers are unprepared. So there's quite a number of doing things, and we need to do some teacher training. Sorry, I don't know why this is going like this. Voila. So the project comprises researchers from ministries from 5 countries, from France, from Ireland, from Luxembourg, from Slovenia, from Italy. And it was multilingual because the idea is to train in the different countries. And it was, so it's been running now for 2 years. We've been actually doing experiments, training teachers. And only a few days ago, on the 1st of June, we released something I'm very, very proud of. So I'm going to say a bit about it now. It's what we call the open textbook. So we tried to reassemble in a textbook that we immediately launched in 5 languages, the 5 languages corresponding to the 5 countries I mentioned, a textbook, an open textbook, in which, well, teachers could actually find out about what is the AI they need, how it works, what are the dangers, what are the qualities, where we are going to. That's a really difficult one. Being able to take the risk of saying where we are going to is a difficult one. But it is one that you can take when you're in an open environment, because if you're doing a book that is published by a publisher, you're going to know that book is going to be there perhaps in 100 years. Whereas when you're doing an open textbook, the whole idea is that when things change, we can actually change the textbook. The textbook is going to be able to move on with the state of knowledge. So we've got a number of chapters out there. We're preparing videos and we're doing things. And one of the things I said is that we've come out directly in 5 languages, and we're certainly open for other languages to join in. I know the other day we had colleagues from Malta, which is a small country, but still, said, okay, wow, we'd like it in Maltese. So you say, okay, let's see how we can do it. So this is the sort of thing. So Volodymyr, whenever you say, we'll try and see how we can come out with a Ukrainian version, but we will need help. Okay. So what we learned through these projects is that openness matters, and it matters in topics like AI because there are topics that are too dynamic to be sort of taken into action through the usual ways. The usual ways is, in a country like France, at least, the minister makes a decision after asking a committee. Then this decision becomes a work plan, which then is passed to the publisher. The publisher gets an author. The author is going to write a book. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to even just get the whole thing started. AI is coming too fast into the picture of education, as you probably know, for us to wait 2 or 3 years. So we need a much more horizontal approach, an approach between peers. And this is where openness helps us a lot. Because in an open way, yes, I can come up with this textbook and I don't need to pass it all the way up to the minister and back down. I can just put it on the web, on the platform, and use tools, social networks, tools between teachers to ensure the dissemination. Second thing that matters through all these projects we're understanding is that we are in a multilingual world. We're much less than yesterday in a world where only one language matters. We have got all these languages that matters. And I give an example here, which is I'm fascinated with the platforms like Netflix, right, in which you have the options of taking series or shows or films or movies from all the countries in the world nearly. And so the kids today are getting used to saying, wow, I really like, the Korean type of movies or the Finnish type of black cinema, or I don't know what. But so the relationship to languages is changing completely, and AI makes it also change because, seeing how tools like DeepL or Google Translate are actually changing the picture, also makes a difference there, makes us reflect upon, what does it mean to learn a language nowadays? My question, why study languages anyway, is very provocative. I love languages, but this is the question that is being raised in the schools in this moment. Okay, I will conclude because I think I was asked 40 minutes and perhaps I've been a little bit more longer. So just saying that AI in education, there are 2 forces. today in the field of education. Very different backers, different ethics, different goals, but they have got the things in common. They're both able to adapt to a fast changing world. Open education is designed through open educational practices to be much more dynamic than, let's say, the formal learning practices. And AI is obviously done there to just adapt and rechange and reshuffle the things all the time. What we see is in both cases, it's a pro and a con. It means that teachers who are very reactive are going to be very happy with both developments. Teachers who are less reactive are going to suffer. And so a teacher of tomorrow is somebody who will need these two tools to actually build a better teaching system. And I think that with that, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.